Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the conference so far. When I was asked to be program chair, I gladly accepted. It was a due honor, and I got to involve the four keynote speakers. And I said to the program committee, I said, would you like me to do a couple of mini keynotes for a challenge? So you get two for the price of one, really. And so this is the first half of my mini keynote, and the second half is tomorrow. And you're going to find out all the solutions tomorrow. So unfortunately, if you can't make tomorrow afternoon, you won't find out about the solutions. And also, I've got a little gift as a memento of this session called the Reality Distortion Field of Testing. So again, if you're not around tomorrow, unfortunately, you won't get the gift. So, but let me start with why it's good to be a tester. Okay, these are my top 10 reasons why it's great to be a tester. And number 10, you get rock hard abs from belly laughing at the project plans. And number 9, running automation scripts makes you look as though you're working really hard. You can invent a name for a set of tests and no one knows what on earth you're doing. I think that's a great one. Number 7, you feel good when the system works okay. You feel even better when the system doesn't. And number 6, you never hear the words, you break it, you buy it. At number 5, you get to do a cool dance when you find a bug. At number 4, you can break anything and blame it on your job. I'm a tester. At number 3, and this is so true, your family and friends never ask you to explain your job. I think that's so true. And number 2, you get paid for ruining the developer's day. Some people would do it for free. And the number 1 reason it's great to be a tester, you can destroy the project manager's day just by shaking your head. I think that's great. You know, this talk was inspired by me reading a book recently about Steve Jobs. It's Steve Jobs' biography, and I would recommend anyone, all of us in IT, get hold of the book and read it. Steve Jobs was an amazing man. He was talented, he was gifted, he was a pioneer, he broke ground with new inventions. He was a sheer genius and a mastermind. He was a boundary pusher in the industry, and he was certainly a visionary of what he wanted to do. That was Steve Jobs, and I have a concern that Steve Jobs, now he's no longer with us, I wonder if Apple is going to lose their way a little bit in our society. But also, when you read the book, you find out that Steve was ruthless. He was basically an authoritarian. He was a dictator. He was very callous. And in some instances in the book, they would actually say he was heartless, particularly when he disowned his daughter, Lisa. So why have I been inspired in this presentation by Steve Jobs? Because in Steve Jobs' book, he was accused by the Apple people worked at Apple to have a reality distortion field relating to the Apple products. And I'm going to read some articles to you about this reality distortion field. The reality distortion field was a term coined by Bud Tribble at Apple Computers in 1981 to describe Steve Jobs' charisma and its effect on the developers working at the Macintosh project. The reality distortion field was said to be Steve Jobs' ability to convince himself and others to believe almost anything with a mix of charm, charisma, bravado, and marketing. Appeasement and persistence was also on the table. The reality distortion field is said to distort the audience's sense of proportion and scales of difficulty and made them believe that the task in hand was possible. And I'm going to read a couple of articles in his book. And this is one where the reality distortion field worked and one when it didn't. Veterans of the Mac team had learned that they could stand up to Jobs. If they knew what they were talking about, he would tolerate and push back and even admire it. By 1983, those familiar with the reality distortion field had discovered something further. They could, if necessary, just quietly disregard what he decreed. If they turned out to be right, he would appreciate their renegade attitude and willingness to ignore authority. After all, that's what he did. So this was where it worked. Jobs was at the Grand Hyatt in Manhattan, preparing for the press previews. On a Sunday morning conference call, it was scheduled. The software manager calmly explained the situation to Jobs. While Hertzberg and the others huddled round the speakerphone, holding their breath, all they needed was 2 extra weeks. Ever heard that before? Their initial shipment was to the dealers. They would have a version of the software labeled demo. And this could be replaced as soon as the new code was finished and at the end of the month. There was a pause. Jobs didn't get angry. Instead, he spoke in cold, somber tones. He told them that they were really great. So great, in fact, that they knew they could get this done. There is no way we're slipping, he declared. There was a collective gasp in the Bramley building working space. You guys have been working on this stuff for months now. Another couple of weeks isn't going to make that much of a difference. You may as well get over it. I'm going to ship the code in a week from Monday with your names on it. Well, we've got to finish it, Steve Capps said. And as they did, once again, Jobs' Reality Distortion Field pushed them to do what he had thought was impossible. You know, that was a situation where he put his muscle in and said, we're not going to delay this. This is going with your names on it whether you like it or not. And you've got to work extra. And that was a Reality Distortion Field. They thought they couldn't get it done, and they did get it done. But have a listen to this. This is where it went wrong. Another problem was the lack of an internal hard drive. Jobs had called Joanna Hoffman at Xerox Bigot. When she had fought for such a storage device, he insisted that the Macintosh have 1 floppy disk drive. If you wanted to copy data, you could end up with a new form of tennis elbow, having to swap floppy disks in and out in a single drive. In addition, the Macintosh lacked a fan, another example of Jobs' dogmatic stubbornness. Fans he felt detracted from the calm of the computer. This caused many of the components to fail and earned Macintosh the name the beige toaster. The Reality Distortion Field can serve as a spur, but then reality hits. So what is this all about? Well, relevance to us today, I think we live in a reality distortion field in testing in our organizations, not unknowingly. And I think sometimes people say things over and over again, and we start to believe it, even though deep down, we're not quite sure. And we just get on and do it, regardless. So I'm going to show you in this session now, I'm going to show you some things that I think are reality distortion fields. But before I do, I want to tell you a little story about something that happened to me about 7 years ago that emphasizes this thing. We do things because we do it. About 7 or 8 years ago, my daughter came to me and she'd just got married, and she said, Dad, she said, why do you cook turkey at Christmas the way you do? Because I've copied the way you do and I just don't get it. And I thought about it and I thought it does seem a bit weird, because I get the turkey, I put a lot of stuff in the turkey, I chop off the actual wings and the legs and I put those in another pan. I then push down on the turkey so that the bone cracks, and then I baste it and then I put it in the oven. And my daughter said, I don't get it, Dad. Why'd you do all of that? Why? And I said, well, maybe it's because it cooks better. Maybe the juices come into the stuffing and cook this. I said, but do you know, I don't know, because my mum did it. And so I went to my mum and I said, Mum, I said, my daughter's asked why I cook the turkey in the way, and I've just copied you. I said, you stuff the turkey, you cut off the things, you push down, you break the bone. Why'd you do that? And she said, because I can't get it in my oven. And you know, that's it. Sometimes we never ever question things that we're on about, and until somebody says, why are you doing this? So I'm going to talk to you about the super tester of today. You know, the super tester of today, the main objective of our work as testers is to run tests and find bugs and gain confidence in the process. And as a byproduct of that, like David said this morning, we provide information in a way that people can make decisions. So there's our super tester of today. However, we're also asked for other things. Estimates. How many people in the audience estimate any type of time for testing? Come on. Okay, 95%. Why? I'm going to challenge you. Why? At the end of the day, what do we estimate for? I've been teaching estimation for the last 20 years. But I'm getting to the stage of why do we bother? Because at the end of the day, we provide an estimate, and it's usually cut in half, and it's usually negotiated, and at worst case scenario, it's ignored. And we spend our time and effort going through lots of details. Now, I've got a real body language. Petra was talking about body language yesterday. I've got a body language for you. Whenever you estimate, if you've taken your car into a mechanic, okay, and you say, look, there's something wrong with the engine, just how much is it going to cost? The mechanic does a very special body language that sets the bar. And they go, and you know that's expensive. So when your manager comes to you and says, how long is it going to take you to test this application? You go, it just sets the bar. You know, let's say, even in Agile, we spend time planning poker. And I don't have a problem with planning poker. But you know, one of the things, the problems we have with testing, it never finishes, it just stops. We can go on and on and on for testing, and managers just don't get why it takes us so long. And we can do work breakdown structures, we could do models, we could do test point analysis, we could do function point analysis, all of these other models for estimation we can use. But at the end of the day, whatever is given to us, we can test with that period of time. And I've lost the will to live sometimes when people ask for an estimate. And I've been there when I've said, you know, it's going to be about 2 weeks with 3 people. And they go, oh, no, that's not going to work. It doesn't fit in our schedule. We'll give you 1 week. And it's like, but I've just done all my work and I've said 2 weeks with 3 people and you've now cut me in half. And now I just go to the point, well, okay, give me whatever you want. And we would do the best we can. And here's a tip. I learned a valuable lesson in my test management role. When I was a test manager, I reported to the CEO. And he said to me, Lloyd, he said, what are the things you want to do as a test manager? You've got a blank sheet of paper. And I said to him this, I want to be the person that signs the system off. That was the worst move of my career. You can never win. And if I had my time again, I would say, I will provide you with information so that you can make the decision. And here's my tip for everyone in this audience. When you go back to work, whenever it is, later this week, next week, and your manager, your project manager comes to you and says, can we sign off today? The answer is always yes. However. Yes, however, we've not run any tests. Yes, however, we've got 3 outstanding defects and they're all high severity, and one of them means the customers can't log onto the system. Yes, however. So let's just humor ourselves. Let's say that we spend about 1 day out of 15 estimating any aspect of testing. So now we've got this pie chart that says that around 93% of our time is allocated to finding bugs and running tests. The other 7% is estimating. However, we need to write a test plan or be involved in a test plan. Now, let me tell you about test plans. I think the act of test planning is vital. I planned to come to Budapest. I didn't just turn up at the airport and go, where am I going today? I planned my flight. I planned my accommodation. I planned all those things. And I think planning is vital. But the outworking of our test planning is less vital, in my opinion. Let me tell you why. Does anyone read it? Seriously, does anyone read it? I had a manager come to me just recently. He'd been with the company 20 years. For 20 years, he'd been producing test plans. He came to me very angry and he said, I'm never, ever, ever going to produce a test plan again. And I said, why? He said, no one reads them. I said, no, you can't be serious. You can't know for definite no one reads them. He said, I do. He says, because I put some very shocking statements in the last 3 test plans and no one came back to me. He said, on my last test plan, he said, I wrote a paragraph that said, I hate owls. If I see an owl, I will shoot it dead. And no one commented on it. And I just wonder if, and again, I'm sure you don't do this, but I used to do it. I needed a test plan, so what did I do? I copied the previous test plan, I changed a few headings, made a few changes, and then that became the new test plan. Really? Is that good? I don't think it's worth any time at all. And maybe we have a half-page test plan with bullet points, and that's good enough. So let's imagine we spend half a day in the 15 writing or being involved in a test plan that no one uses. Now, I'm challenging your thoughts. I want you to be aware of some of the things we're asked to do, and is it really necessary in the whole scheme of things? And maybe you're sitting there thinking, my test plans are always read. Okay, we'll try put in I hate owls and see if anyone comments. One lady actually put in, if you get to this part of the test plan, come and see me and you'll get a box of chocolates. And no one came to see her. So now we're down to 89.5% of running tests. But also we're asked to produce tests at various levels. We're asked to produce ideas for testing. We're asked to produce test cases. And we use techniques. And I'm a big fan of techniques. And I think techniques can actually enhance our tests. But just let's say we spend 2 days out of the 15 actually designing our tests. That's about 14%. So now we're down to 75.5% of us running tests and finding bugs. You see where I'm going with this, can't you? Because our main objective in testing is running tests and finding bugs. So let's not stop there. How many, and please have a show of hands here, I want to see, and be truthful, how many of you are asked to produce detailed test procedures or scripts in your organization and run them? Okay, probably, oh yeah, I'm sure there's more than that. Okay, probably about half of you. Let me tell you about detailed test scripts and procedures. There's only 3 reasons to produce them. 1, if you want someone else to run those scripts that doesn't know the system. That's a good reason. Number 2, you want it for automation. Automation tools do not know the detail. You have to tell automation scripts what to do. And number 3 is auditability. Failing those 3 things, I think they're a complete and utter waste of time. And they drain every energy out of a good, experienced tester. And we're writing these monolithic scripts that are awful to maintain, tedious to build at first sight, and terrible to run. And I liken it to a recipe. One of my hobbies is cooking. I've been starting to do it over the last 7 years, and I'm not a chef by any means, but I'm just getting into Thai food. I went to Thailand this year, and I love Thai food, but I'm starting to build up my repertoire of Thai food cooking, but I need recipes. Now, a script or a procedure is like a recipe. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. And if we think about it, this up here, this is my idea for testing. The ingredients are my test cases, and the recipe is this detail here that we need to follow. Now, I put it to you. If you said to Gordon Ramsay, do you know who Gordon Ramsay is? Yeah? Okay. If you said to Gordon Ramsay, Gordon, could you make this dish for me? Gordon would say, absolutely, Lloyd. Fantastic, I'll do that. And you said to him, but what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to use Jamie Oliver's recipe. He will use the F word a lot. Now, experienced testers, this is a no-go area. If I was in an organization and they gave me these detailed scripts to run, I would leave. Because as an experienced tester, I want to use my creativity. I want to use my skill set in order to test the product, not to be told by other people. Now, let's assume we spend 2 out of 15 days actually designing and building our test procedures. That's 14%. Now, I mentioned 3 reasons for actually building these scripts, and one of them is if we wanted to give our scripts to somebody else. Now, I'm at an organization that had outsourced their test execution to India. Now, I don't have a problem with that at all, but what I do have a problem is with this. Their experienced testers were spending all of their time in the UK writing detailed scripts for the people in India to run. And what they found is the people in India would only run what they were told to run. And they wouldn't do anything else. And I said to them, why don't you do this? Now, we have a program in the UK called the Great British Bake Off. I don't know if you've seen it or it's come over to Budapest or in your country. Now, one of the items in the program is the technical challenge. And I always like the technical challenge because what they do is they give the recipe, but they take things out. And it's like, do this and then bake in the oven. And it's like, what temperature, how long? And it's like, they don't know. And they've got to use their skill in order to do it. So I turn around and say, if you've got to give scripts over to another part of the organization or other testers, just take things out and let them use their mind and build their experience up rather than blindly following a script. So, we're down to 61.5% of our time executing tests. However, we need environments. Test environments, it's amazing. I go around to many organizations and I think test environments are the weakest link in most organizations. Test environments that don't have data that's representative, they have volatile environments that keep crashing. Sometimes they're using someone else's environment, and it just creaks along. And testers really struggle. And one of the things I did as a manager is I monitored how much time my environment was available for my testers. And if it went below a certain percentage, I would be raising alarm bells to get a new environment. If our test environment is out of date, it's not representative, it's volatile, then testing cannot succeed. So we do need to spend time generating our data and generating our environment. But there are three options we can do. We could create our own. We could use someone else to create our environments, another team, an operations team, or a mixture of the two. But there are advantages and disadvantages of both of those. It takes time to define our environment. It takes time to create our data and also to maintain it. And if we do outsource it to somebody else, then we're reliant on those other people, and that has political problems. Our environment was with the operations team. And whenever environments went into the operations team, we had to phone them up to start servers and to stop servers. And initially, they were really, really encouraging, and they were really helpful. And you'd phone them up and say, can you start the server for me? And oh, yes, Lloyd, that's no problem. 5 minutes later, I'd be phoning them and saying, could you stop the server? Yes, Lloyd, no problem. After a day of this, it was, can you start the server? No. Why? We're busy. Okay, when can you do it? Next week. And it was a real problem, and we decided to take the server out and maintain it ourselves, but that took effort. So if we say half a day, each of us, to spend on the data and the environment, that's now 3.5% of it. So we're now down to 58% of actually running tests and finding bugs. However, we provide information, we provide test reports, and gathering the data and providing information is a job that we need to do so that people can make informed decisions. But what information do we provide? Okay, number of test cases. How many produce number of test cases for our managers? Run, passed, yeah, about half the audience. Why? Why? What's the test case? Serious question. You see, what managers like, they like large numbers. Pie charts. But they like large numbers. So when you say, we have run 20,000 tests today, they go, good job. They have no idea what those tests are doing. No idea whatsoever. My manager gave me an objective. We had automation. And he said to us, he said, we've spent a lot of money on automation tools for you and your team. He said, when I come down at the end of every day, he said, I want to see every machine running automation scripts. Every machine. And we had 20 machines. And I just thought, this is absolutely ridiculous. He didn't ask me what we were running. He just wanted to see automation running. So he's retired now, so I can tell you this story. To this day, he doesn't know what I did. An ex-programmer, I went into the script, I wrote a script, and what it did was opened a screen, entered data, opened another screen, entered data, deleted the data, closed the screen, opened the screen, entered data, closed the screen, and I just looped it round. And every time I saw him put his coat on, I fired it up on all my 20 machines. And every day he came past my office and he went, "Good job, Lloyd." I got my appraisal at the end of the year, and appraisals are linked to salary increases, and he said, you've met that objective. I saw your scripts running every day for a year. He said, you get a bonus. So I got extra money for it. Now, a ludicrous objective, running automation, but they don't know what it is. And it's the same with test cases. Unless they know the quality of the test cases, the quantity of them is meaningless. And the procedures that have run and passed, what is in a procedure? How many tests have we got in a procedure? The number of defects found and fixed is meaningless without the quality of those defect reports and what those defect reports are doing. Sheer numbers are meaningless. But maybe looking at coverage, looking at environment availability, defect measure rates, this is a great measure, and I've got a little chart and that you can use if you want to get hold of it. What it is, it's the rate of defects found per hour of test execution. Okay, it's not numbers, it's a rate of how many defects you are finding per hour of execution. And on one of my graphs, I've got the number of defects coming down. So if you presented that to management, they'll go, "Good job, we can sign off." But if you look at the measure rate of the number of defects found per hour, it's escalating exponentially, which is absolutely terrible. So defect measure rate is a really good measure. So let's say half a day out of the 15 dedicated to providing information. And most of that information, I think, is useless. And I was talking to somebody earlier. I think we need to ask our managers, what is it you want from us? One senior manager said to his test manager, "All I want on my dashboard is a red light and a green light, red or green." And I said to him, "But there's also yellow." And he said to me, "I don't get yellow." And then he said a really interesting thing. He said, "Most accidents at traffic lights happen on yellow." And I thought, you're absolutely true. So my final thing before handing over to Les, communication and meetings. Are you lonely? Don't like working on your own? Hate making decisions? Then call a meeting. You can see people, draw flowcharts, feel important, impress, all your company time. Meetings are practical alternative to work. People who enjoy meetings should not be in charge of anything. Another one, I love this one. If I die, I hope it's during a staff meeting because the transition to death will be so subtle. And IT meetings, stressing the importance of getting stuff done instead of actually getting it done. There are many different forms of communication we have. We have Skype, we have impromptu meetings, we have emails, we have telephone calls. And I put this in, remember the good old days. The good old days before we had these. Many of you can't remember those good old days. But I tell you, when I went on holiday, in the good old days, I said to my team, "Goodbye. See you in 2 weeks." Not now. Everyone expects you to be available 24/7 because of these things. And I think sometimes it's good for us to switch these off and have some quality time with our family. Nobody on their deathbed ever said, "I wish I'd spent more hours in the office." Many people said, "I wish I spent more hours with the family." And I said yesterday, 70% of meetings are useless, the other 30% are a waste of time. And if you go to lots of meetings, then question it, because maybe they're not worthwhile. I never ever went to a meeting without an agenda. I used to say to them, if you can't be bothered putting an agenda together, I can't be bothered turning up. So tomorrow you're going to get the second half, you're going to get the solution. But I'm going to hand over to Tal to introduce one of my favorite speakers, Les. But Tal, over to you.
So before you go, we have a question and
Okay.
a compliment. If this will be on. Okay, can you get the questions on the screen? If not, I will read it. The question, I understand you don't like monolithic test scripts, but what about repeatability and regression testing?
Well, as I said, I think the three reasons, the second one was automation. And with automation is repeatability. And if you're running these scripts manually over and over again, I would leave the company, seriously. I don't think we are meant as human beings to repeat anything more than once. I'll say that again. I don't think, that's a joke. But I was seriously, automation, fantastic. It's repeatability. And we've got to do regression testing, but automate them. Don't do this manually. It'll tear your hair out. We've got to vary our tests to find more bugs. And I like it to James Bark. James Bark said this. He said, your scripts, your procedures are like a roadmap through a minefield. He said, the first time you go through it, you might find a few mines. But the second time you follow the same path, you won't find anything. And if our job is finding lots of mines, then I don't want to go through the same path. So repeatability, absolutely, but automate it. Don't do it manually.